Hi and welcome if you've watched any of the previous videos. My name is Tim Spees and I'm serving as a guide in helping you, the viewer, to take the most important journey of your life. The journey of finding out the purpose of your life. Last time we looked at various people who have claimed or are believed to have claimed that they speak for the designer or creator of the human race. We used 3 criteria to evaluate people to see if they were messengers for the creator. The first criteria is they needed to have claimed to have spoken for the designer. The second criteria is, did they provide solutions to mankind's greatest problems? The third was, what special thing or things did they do above and beyond the normal human experience in order to validate their claim that they did speak for the designer? We evaluated the most popular and most looked to names in history except one. Those people with perhaps billions of people looking to them and or believing their writings to try and know and understand God the designer, and we briefly evaluated them against those 3 criteria. What we found was that none of them passed all 3 criteria. Again, this was a brief and summarized review of those messengers and their messages, so if you are dissatisfied with the conclusion, please do seek to prove that the conclusion is wrong. In several of the last few videos, I have alluded to a solution to the problem of identifying the designer's messenger. Before we do that, let's reconsider a point I brought up in one of the last few videos. If it is true that we as human beings have a significant problem regarding living the way the designer wants us to, how could that be solved? If he or she sent a messenger, what would be the likely outcome of that messenger telling us that we had significant problems and that we were preventing us from being what we were meant to be? As we observed in the first few videos, there are 3 obstacles to both taking this journey as well as obstacles to our being what we were intended to be. Do you remember what they were? They're pride, fear, and selfishness. So if pride means we think highly of ourselves and thus are averse to someone telling us we are less than what we think we are, what will be the likely reaction to someone telling us that we have significant problems that we need help in solving? The likely reaction is offense. We will be offended, and the depth of our offense will vary upon the depth of our pride. Normally, when someone offends us, we don't want to listen to that person, or we seek to find fault in that person. In short, we resist the information that was communicated and look for ways to justify ourselves against the information, or we attack the messenger. Again, this is a generalization and is not to say that there are some people who struggle less with pride than others. However, a person's level of pride is oftentimes associated with their position in the world. In other words, people who have authority or influence over many people, those who have more power than others, are more likely to have greater pride than a person who is at a lower position in their culture, society, nation, or community. This is not always the case, but it is a good general rule. The saying that absolute power corrupts absolutely is a true saying for most human beings. Of course, our pride wants us to respond and say, yeah, that's true, but not for me. I'd be a really good absolute ruler of the human race. With these things being so, and if the messenger of the designer brought a message that indicated something that offends our pride, how would he or she be received, especially by those in power? What if the people in power had their positions, power, and the material benefits they gained from their position threatened by the messenger and his message? Not in a violent way, but rather the messenger just rebuked their way and instead provided an alternative way to live that would make their positions irrelevant. Well, just look at human history to get the answer to that question. Pride, fear, and selfishness is the explanation to the sad history of human conflict and wrongdoings. Furthermore, what about fear? Fear holds sway over most people in some degree or another about one thing or another. What if the messenger's message included something that caused fear in people? As you might know, change or differences from what we are used to generally causes fear or anxiety in us. For example, there are many people who are in very bad situations that could be solved if they just had the courage to venture away from that situation. But fear of the unknown is more powerful than the abuse they are enduring in an environment or situation they know. In other words, they would rather experience abuse or suffering in a place and from people they know rather than face the unknown elsewhere, even if it is reasonable that the abuse or suffering will end elsewhere. This is the power of fear. It overcomes reason and hope and binds people just as surely as physical shackles or imprisonment. So, back to the designer's messenger and his or her message. What if it had an element that caused fear in people? Would the message be well received? No, it would not. What about selfishness? Now, a selfish message would be very well received by the people of the world, for that fits in with our basic nature. But how about a selfless message? How about a message of do with less to help others? Or a message of being materially wealthy is bad. It is a selfish life, a poorly lived life. Or a message of the designer wants people to help one another, to share what you've got with others, to use material wealth collectively to help other people. How well would that message be received? It is essentially the opposite belief to capitalism, or a system which says each person should earn or make what they can and then sell it at the highest price possible and enrich themselves. That system has greed as the grease that makes it work, and it is the most successful trade or economic system on the planet, perhaps in history. So if the designer's messenger said, no, greed or selfish motivated trade or economic systems are not what the Creator wants, how well would he and his message be received? Can you see where this is heading? If the designer, having given humans a free will to choose what they believe and what they want, will not use force to bring to pass what he wants for his creations, what would be the result? I suggest you look at the world to get that answer. Division, strife, conflict, selfishness, pain, suffering, the vast majority of which is caused by humans, either directly or indirectly through inaction. If the designer sent a messenger to describe and model to the world what he or she wanted, and yet the world did not want to behave that way, what would be the result? Well, the first result would be that we've already alluded to. People's pride, fear, and selfishness would cause them to destroy the messenger. Their emotional reaction of offense to the claims and message of the messenger would cause them to prevent the messenger from continuing the offensive message through any means possible, including one of people's favorite solutions, violence. Once the messenger was stopped or destroyed, it would be easy to handle him or her. Perhaps the cleverest way to handle the messenger's claims and message, if they were enabled to persist into the future, would be to ignore his key teachings and pay lip service only to the messenger and the parts of his message they like, which is to say they would hold him up with their words only and not their actions. In other words, they would say, oh, wasn't the messenger a great person, a great prophet, etc., while at the same time never intending to do what he said. Words are cheap and increasingly so. This way, people can deceive themselves into thinking that the designer will not be upset or displeased or disappointed with us because we celebrate his messenger even while we don't listen to the messenger. Let's consider again for a moment the claimed messengers of the past. Muhammad for Islam, Siddhartha for Buddhism, and Moses for Judaism and much of Christianity. As we said, they did not pass the three criteria of being a messenger from the designer. Think about a bit more about their messages and their actions. Did their message call for a people to change as individuals first? No, they did not. Did their solution to humanity's problems cause people to change, to overcome pride, fear, and selfishness in order to be what the designer wants? No, they did not. I encourage the viewer to verify this. Go and study their teachings and lives to see. In that regard, and most importantly, don't leave out teachings or behaviors of theirs that nullify or contradict what you might be trying to prove. If you do a relatively objective job with your research, you will find that these messengers did not bring the solution that people needs, that humanity needs, either for individuals or collectively for groups of people. What they proposed or instituted was flawed and did not address the root problems of mankind, or it only benefited their groups at the expense of others. There was only one who both passed all three criteria as well as brought the solution people need to live rightly, according to the way the designer intended. Let us now consider the person who passes all three criteria. First, this person clearly claimed to represent the creator or designer of the human race, In fact, he claimed to have a unique relationship with the designer and to know the designer very well. In addition, this messenger claimed that the designer both sent him as his only and unique messenger to humanity. Did this person provide the solution or solutions to mankind's greatest problems? Yes, he did. He recognized that pride, fear, and selfishness were the root cause of many of the evils that people commit, and he provided a way to be free of their controlling influences in our lives. Finally, did this person validate that he was a unique person among a race of people? That he spoke for the designer and creator of the human race? Yes, he did. He performed things no one else in history did, and he did so in an authentic, genuine way as opposed to fanciful tales that have little or no reasonable basis or context. In fact, the signs he performed had as their primary purpose proving he was the designer's messenger. He did things that broke the laws of nature as we understand them, and in so doing said in essence, believe who I represent and what I am saying based on the things that I'm doing. Before you jump to a conclusion as to whom I'm speaking about, let us consider a few things. Remember the possibility that the designer's message would be unpopular, that it might offend people's pride, be viewed as fearful, and insist we live selflessly instead of selfishly. Let's consider some of the messenger's teachings in this regard. Here are some of the teachings that offend people's pride. Quote, if you don't listen to me, you will miss so much and lose that which is most valuable. Unquote. What is pride's response? Oh, I don't need to listen to anyone but myself. Next quote, quote, you need a leader, and I am the leader appointed by the designer. Please do what I say. Unquote. What's pride's response? Get lost. I'm the leader of my life, and I'll choose who I am led by at my church, my work, or my government. Next quote, quote, you have a serious problem ignoring both the designer and what he wants, and if you knew him well, like I do, you could know him as your endearing father, who you desperately need, not some weird Wizard of Oz type person barking out rules from above. Unquote. What is pride's response? I don't have a problem, and I don't need anyone. Who the blankety blank do you think you are anyway? Next quote, quote, you need to change and stop doing wrong and selfish things if you'd like to live a good life and be the way the designer intends. Unquote. What is pride's response? I'm not such a bad person. Maybe you ought to look at your own faults first. Next quote, quote, you need to reject money and materialism as a way of life and instead love people. For trying to serve both money and people is impossible, for you cannot love both. You cannot be what you are supposed to be, nor enter into the designer's realm of life if you care more about money and material things than people. Unquote. What is pride's response? Well, I love other people, maybe not perfectly, but I do. What are you saying, that I need to live in a commune or something? The American way is good and right, and you can take your weird crap elsewhere. Next quote, or here are some other teachings of his that cause fear in people. Quote, you need to lose your life in this world in order to enter into life in my Father's realm. You need to turn away from the things that people value as important in this world in order to be the change agent the people need. You need to live for me and for love. If you do this, you will gain life with him. Unquote. What is fear's response? What do you mean lose my life? That sounds insane. What do you mean turn away from what people consider valuable? Next quote, quote, you cannot live for your closest blood and legal relatives. You cannot let them make your decisions for you. If you are to follow me and they refuse, you will have to leave them in order to do the work I have for you. But don't worry, there will be others who will replace them and love you even better than they did. Unquote. What is fear's response? What do you mean leave my family? You must be kidding. How can that be a loving thing to do? You can't mean that. I can't do that. Next quote, quote, don't concern yourself with what you will eat or drink or where you will live. Just love people and share with them my message, my words, and my teachings, and my life. Unquote. What is fear's response? So what do you mean? I have to live on the street, naked, without anything to eat? Here are some teachings that condemn the selfish way of life from the messenger. Quote, treat others the way you want to be treated. Do you want people to take from you or to give to you? So treat others the way you want to be treated, unquote. What is the selfish response? Nobody lives that way. Why should I? I can't even survive, let alone get ahead at the same time being a giving person. That's just not how the world works. Next quote. The solution for both mankind and your personal problems is selfless compassion for all others, also known by the word love. But sadly, most will refuse to do that and instead try anything but love, unquote. What is the selfish response to that? Hey, I love people. I go to church and don't hurt other people. I'm a good person. But at the end of the day, I don't see anyone treating me that way, so I've got to do what I've got to do to survive. Next quote. Love one another. Take care of each other. Look after one another. Treat each other like highly valued actual brothers and sisters, unquote. What is the selfish and fearful response to that? What are you saying? Are you saying be that way with people other than my natural family? Are you starting a cult or something? Well, as you can see, the answers of pride, fear, and selfishness are very defensive in nature. These are just a few of the teachings of the messenger of the designer. Can you find fault with them if you approach them from a selfless perspective? Ask yourself sincerely and with all and as much self-honesty as you can muster. Are human beings living the way he says? Am I living the way he says? We ought to, according to just the few teachings you just heard. If we are not, whose fault is that? The designers? The messengers? Or are you and I to blame? Who is to blame for my condition? If you are truly honest, you will point the finger of blame at yourself. For each of us are responsible for failures associated with our words and behavior. You have been given life, and the designer's messenger has been and is available to you if you would just listen to him. And so, the first part of life's most important journey is over. The way to finding the highest purpose and meaning to your life has been revealed. You need to listen to the designer's appointed messenger to mankind, and he will tell you. This is the end of Finding Life Video Series 1. In Video Series 2, we'll take a close look at the messenger whose teachings were introduced to us in this video and thus continue the journey. In those teachings, the designer's messengers will explain clearly how you can find his clear purpose for your life and deep meaning in that purpose. You'll be very surprised just how much the messenger has been misrepresented by people who claim to represent him. And I hope as you hear the wonderful message of the messenger, you will be filled with wonder and hope. Until next time, be real, get past the shallowness and pretentiousness of typical American life, and look deeper to find what you truly need.